We'll roll call in just a moment. Stand by. Well, good morning and welcome to the June 18th Audit Committee meeting. I recognize that we're having today's Audit Committee meeting on traditional Treaty 6 territory, the home of the Cree, the Dene, the Saulteaux, the Nakota Sioux, and the Blackfoot peoples, as well as one of the great homelands of the Métis Nation. I will call us to order and roll call with members of the committee first. Vice Chair Knack.
Microphone I must use here now. There we go. Good morning.
Good morning. And I don't have a handy attendance guide for the other members of Audit Committee, but Councillor Esslinger, I know, is an Audit Committee member.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Councillor Cartmel is an Audit Committee member.
Good morning.
Good morning. And Councillor Nicol is an Audit Committee member.
Good morning.
Good morning. And who am I missing? There's a fourth. Is there another council member?
There's not.
Okay. And then Mr. Burrows is here this morning as one of the public
Good morning.
members. Good morning. And Mr. Edmondson sent his regrets. And Mr. Burrows has a time constraint as well, which he must leave at 10:30. So I think we should be able to get through the agenda in time, but if we lose him, we will lose quorum. So strictly speaking, we might even consider adjusting orders of the day to reflect that, or we can just let it unfold. So, but anyway, I'm glad you could join us. Thank you for making that possible, Mr. Burrows, against all your other busy priorities. So we do have enough then to get started. Thank you. I now need a motion then to adopt the agenda. Councillor Knack.
So moved, and I think it's just as is.
Thank you. And I would note that we're joined this morning by Councillor Banga, and I see Councillor Walters has just joined. Do we have any other members of council joining this morning?
I'm with you, John Zadek.
Councillor Zadek, welcome. Can't see everybody all at once on the little screen here, so welcome to all of you. Okay, so the agenda is before us. Any questions on it? Pretty straightforward, obviously. So please vote on the adoption of the agenda.
We're just waiting for your vote, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm in the wrong meeting. I'm yes. Display the vote. Carried unanimously. The minutes, Councillor Knack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move the adoption of the meeting minutes from the April 16th, 2021 Audit Committee meeting.
Thank you. Any questions, concerns, or errors or omissions with the minutes? Not seeing any, please vote.
Just waiting for your vote again, Mr. Mayor. Oh, thank you.
Should have it now. Display the vote. Carried. Protocol items. We'll have a more robust and council-wide acknowledgement of Mr. Ewan's extraordinary 2 decades of service as our city auditor on Tuesday next week. And since he is council's employee, I don't want to steal council's thunder for that recognition. But since he works intimately with the Audit Committee, I think, of course, it's appropriate to acknowledge that this is Mr. Ewan's last Audit Committee meeting with us as our city auditor after that incredible tenure of service. And so I wanted to make sure that we took the opportunity this morning to congratulate him as an Audit Committee and thank him for not just the the substance of all of the reviews and the work and the recommendations and the follow-up and the advice, which has absolutely made the city better, but also for the style and grace that he has brought to this work that has created the kind of trust with city employees and city management to be able to do his best work. And that is the art of a great internal auditor. The technical skills, I gather, can be learned and are very, very important for any organization. But the art of finding a way to build the relationships necessary and the trust necessary, both with an audit committee and with the subjects of the audit, not just in city administration, but in partner organizations in the extended civic family who have asked for him to come and help. And so that trust extends well beyond the city of Edmonton, and I believe it extends to our public as well, who I am always happy to say, from a position of not as much independence as one might like in these situations, but certainly as chair of the Audit Committee, I can say in no uncertain terms that we have had one of the best auditors serving this city for many, many years, and that while it is a great loss for us to see him retire, we are really glad that he is at the point in his life and his office and his team and this organization are at a place where he feels ready to make that step. And he has absolutely earned the very happiest and most peaceful retirement possible. And so on behalf of all of us here at the Audit Committee, I wonder if you would join me in a quick round of applause. I'm going to take my feet for this. Thank you, David, for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was already going to be an emotional meeting to get through, and with those very elegant and words, it's made it even tougher, and I really appreciate it. I have like a 1 minute, some 1 minute remarks, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, please.
Well, again, thank you, and I want to start off by, I think it's important to start off considering what everyone's gone through the last 15 months to say that on behalf of the audit staff, I want to thank all city employees who worked tirelessly to keep city programs and services running through these past 15 months. I have every confidence that Edmonton will emerge from the pandemic stronger than ever. Like much of the city, my office had to quickly adapt to changing conditions from the onset of the pandemic. In an instant, my staff went from working at their office desk and conducting interviews at the locations we were auditing to working from home and virtual meetings. I'm proud of the value we provided to administration, Audit Committee, and City Council against the backdrop of the global pandemic. With this being my last Audit Committee meeting, I want to congratulate and thank Audit Committee and the members who have served on it. A strong Audit Committee is important for all organizations. And Mr. Mayor, led by your leadership as chair of the Audit Committee, the City of Edmonton has benefited from an open avenue of communication between the City Auditor, the Administration, and Audit Committee. All parties were of the mindset that the City of Edmonton is publicly accountable for the services it provides, its taxpayers, and for the way it uses its resources to provide those services. Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, and all members of Audit Committee, both past and present, that I've served with, for establishing an effective audit committee that helps City Council ensure that it fulfills its overall governance role of stewardship, leadership, responsibility, and accountability for the City of Edmonton. I also want to formally congratulate and welcome Mr. Quach as Edmonton's next City Auditor. The City of Edmonton will benefit from his professionalism, collaborative approach, and the audit and leadership skills that he will bring to the office of the City Auditor and the City of Edmonton. It was a great selection, Mr. Mayor. I've indicated to him that he is blessed to be entering this new leadership chapter in his professional life with the benefit of an incredibly talented and dedicated group of individuals that reside within the audit office. I'm blessed to have worked with him. I'm sorry. In closing, I'll say this today and I'll say it next week and probably a few more times before my last day. I was truly grateful and humbled to have been your city auditor for the past 20 years. Thank you again.
Well,
Take it easy on me today.
Well, don't apologize. Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ewan. Don't apologize for wearing your heart on your sleeve. I feel you, and your genuineness has always been part of your strength. So thank you. Well said. And Mr. Quach has huge shoes to fill, and he knows that. And I appreciate that you have already had a number of really good conversations with him, and that he's going to get onboarded really thoroughly and effectively to not skip a beat. And your passion for your team that you built in your office is clear too, and I think it's in good hands with him. And I just want to revise and extend one thing I said earlier. I said you are one of the best, but you are the best. All right, so now we need to select items for debate. I haven't seen anyone click on. Councillor Knack.
Just a quick question on, I guess, 6162.
6162, okay. Other selections? I think we should get the presentation. 63's good news, but I'll select it because I think we should hear it, and there may be a few clarifying questions on it, but so I'll select 63 if no one else will. So that's everything. There are no requests to speak or requests for time specific. I'll ask if there are any councillor inquiries. Still never had one at Audit Committee. I guess this is my last Audit Committee meeting too, actually. So dodge that bullet. Trying to figure out what to do with councillor inquiries at an Audit Committee. All right, then the dashboard, I think we can go straight to questions on the dashboard probably then. Councillor Knack, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is just a little bit of a nitpicky question or request going forward. So, and I see it in the administrative report. There's one piece. First, I just see the recommendation number 8, the first one, transit service revenue management audit. I know we try not to do like quarters that things are going to be done in. That one has a quarter end date, so I'm maybe looking at Mr. I don't know, just to make sure that in the future that we might want to try to have a fixed date so that we have something to hold people to instead of we'll finish it between October and December.
Yes, Councillor Knack, and I should thank you for this report because it was actually your motion that we implemented the recommendation follow-up process on a quarterly, on every audit committee basis. So talking to the team and talking to Mr. Quach, we'll be recommending that we could probably make some tweaks to this report to make it a little more useful. We could probably put the original due date, revised due date, and you're right, the specificity of the dates are probably important. So we take that recommendation.
Yeah, and it's less, I guess, a question to you, more just flagging it for administration when we're setting dates. We're generally good at setting a firm date, and I just think for making sure we're holding ourselves accountable, we shouldn't give ourselves a wider range like that. So that was just a flag for that. And then, sorry, is there something?
Just, we could do that,
Perfect.
absolutely.
And then as I think, and this is again maybe more of a comment that might lead into any future changes, this is almost one of those reports that I wonder if we actually need an administrative separate report or if there can just be a page from administration added in, because what I found is that if you go through the audit portion of this, the revised due dates aren't there, but we have all the revised due dates now in the administrative report, so it's just hard to sometimes keep track, because if you had only looked at the one, you would think, oh, there's no current date. So just again, a flag, I think, for making sure we're keeping track of everything. So, and because I feel like I had to ask a question on your last audit committee meeting.
No, very good points, and I know my staff is listening, and they definitely will be modifying this to make sure it's as readable and beneficial to audit committee as possible.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'll move both reports that we received for information, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Knack. Are there any other questions? Not seeing any, then please vote on the recommendation follow-up reports, receipt of information. And while we're doing that, I've been informed that Mr. Burrows has more flexibility this morning than I had thought previously, and so thank you for that, Chris. And it looks like we were not going to need it, but who knows? So, but thank you for letting me know.
Just waiting for Mr. Burrows. Thank you.
Display the vote. Carried unanimously. All right, let's have the presentation on 6.3.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and a very brief presentation, and I'm glad that you acknowledged that it is a good news report. And over the years, we've also talked amongst each other that some assurance and good news stories is part of the role, and I'm glad that we have this. On April 19th, 2021, City Council approved a revised community energy transition strategy. This strategy is visionary and ambitious as it establishes a roadmap to addressing climate change from a municipal perspective. This revised strategy is standing on the shoulders of the original community energy transition strategy that had been approved in 2015. It was under this original strategy that the city established a number of community programs to encourage energy transition actions by citizens and industries in Edmonton. This audit takes a close look at the operation and performance of 5 of those community programs, because ultimately ambitious strategies can only be achieved if the programs and objectives that support them are effective. I'm pleased to say that with the exception of some work to be done on performance measures, the findings in this audit were generally positive. The programs were well aligned to the objectives of the energy transition strategy, and costs and participation were reasonably aligned to budgets and expectations. Funding for the programs was secure and adequate to satisfy program demand in most cases. Turnaround time for program administration was reasonable, given the complexity of each program. And administration has been adjusting their business planning model that will improve how corporate strategies, including the energy transition strategy, will be implemented. We did find that the performance measures may not accurately reflect the performance of the programs. We have made one recommendation in this audit to address this. By ensuring that there are direct performance measures linked to the program outcomes, specifically greenhouse gas reductions, the city would be better able to assess the impact the programs are having on the strategic outcomes. Additionally, by improving data management and documentation, the city can better ensure that measures are accurate and can be validated. We believe that this audit can provide some assurance to council, administration, and the public around the operations of these programs as the city moves forward with the goals identified in the revised community energy transition strategy. In closing, I want to thank Ms. McCabe, Mr. Snyder, and Mr. Brostrom, and the staff of Planning and Environmental Services for their assistance during this audit, and I'm not sure if they have any opening remarks.
Comments from administration?
Yeah, I can jump in on this. We've got a few opening comments, basically on the line, in line with Mr. Ewan's comments. So through Connect Edmonton, the city plan, and our recently approved energy transition and economic action plan, the city has committed to growing sustainably. Our environment programs are an important a city building initiative that will help to shape Edmonton's future economy and the way the city is built as we transition to a low carbon and climate resilient community. The city auditor's report identifies an area where administration identifies some areas where administration can improve performance measures and reaffirms the city's commitment to service excellence, fiscal responsibility, and making significant progress in reducing community greenhouse gas emissions to achieve council's climate goals. Administration agrees with the report and has taken actions to enact the recommendation. Thank you for the comprehensive work that was done by the city auditor, and we wish Mr. Ewan an enjoyable upcoming retirement, and would be pleased to answer any questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Brostrom. Councillor Essinger, go ahead.
Thank you. When I looked at the recommendation, Mr. Ewan, you said to improve transparency by disclosing information that may not be obvious from the measures themselves. Could you give me an example?
I guess, Councillor Essinger, probably generally when we looked at it, there were issues with the data that made it really difficult to determine how each of the programs were doing. So in general, we had to sort through a number of items to try to make a determination if the program was achieving its goal. So it was kind of across the board. There was information within all of the programs that could say, yes, it's working, but to make a definitive answer, it was a challenge.
So the information was there, it was just in a variety of places, and it was hard to figure out which one aligned to it? Is that what part of
Yes, it wasn't adaptable. It wasn't easy to make a determination on how far the program had come to meet its ultimate objective. So I think you hit it on the head.
Well, thank you very much, because, you know, this is a great audit, and I think it really shows that we have the information, we just got to get in the right spot. So thank you very much. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Essinger. My question is sort of springboarding from the audit. It looks like these programs are going well. And I wondered, first from you, Mr. Ewan, and then from administration, you know, based on this, and in the context of particularly the federal government really raising the national level of ambition around these program areas and signaling a desire to partner directly with local agencies and municipalities to scale up that ambition, and perhaps for communities like us to be involved in the distribution and accountabilities for expanded federal programs for energy efficiency, for example, and building retrofit particularly. What do you see any caution, or to what extent do you think these programs might be scalable based on what you've seen so far looking under the hood?
Good question, Mr. Mayor. And I guess looking at how the programs were structured in terms of the administrative costs, that were all very reasonable when you look at the nature of these programs. The fact that there was a cautious approach in a couple of them, one where the demand was so overwhelming and City Council made a decision that we better scale back. And another one where a pilot project where it just did not seem to take off, the administration quickly decided to get out of it. I think that approach makes sense because you're right, this is something that is global, worldwide, and all citizens have some concerns about. The challenge right now is the fiscal challenges that everyone's facing. You want to make sure that you go into it and you are able to show that there are some results so that the acceptance stays there. So I like the way the administration's approached it. I like the way City Council's approached it and the strategy, and I'm not sure if Mr. Brostrom can add anything to that.
Yeah, maybe I could just add that, that is probably one of our biggest challenges right now is after sort of being the only game in town for a number of years to a number of programs being announced, whether they've been implemented but a lot have been signaled. And for example, the green program, the green retrofit program from the federal government that was announced, I think late last year, but then the program details came out a couple of weeks ago. And again, we've had to adjust our programming around that to make sure that we're stacking in the appropriate areas and backing off in some areas. So for example, on the energy audit side of things, and the EnerGuide audit, I should say, we backed off on the funding of that because the federal government has picked that up. So it frees up a little bit of resource and we can repurpose that into other portions of that program.
And I would add, Your Worship, that I think I would summarize that by saying we have to be very vigilant from an environmental scanning perspective to see what's coming and see what programs are out there at different orders of government and within this space to make sure we're always doing our best. So, I would summarize by, a constant vigilant environmental scan is important for us to make sure we can do this quickly.
Well, yeah, the policy landscape is changing and the program landscape is changing, and both of those things are changing very, very fast in government terms. But I trust the city to be nimble in that regard relative to those other orders of government. And then that was going to be my second question. You've already anticipated it, which is the degree to which, as other orders, like we moved into these spaces because other orders retreated from them for a period of time, having been active and then inactive and then active and then inactive. And right now they're active again. That could change. But as they move into them, I guess to the point of the recommendation, that would be one of the indicators we might use to determine whether whether it's time to exit from one of these areas or scale back so that we can move into another area where we've identified another gap. So I think you've already both spoken to that, but and so I feel reassured that nimbleness is there. But Mr. Ewan, your sense of the not just the metrics to be able to do that, but the willingness and the culture to do that within the area that you've looked at here.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, and actually I believe the energy transition strategy actually uses words like being agile and making sure that you look at the results and when that initial push from government is required, but as important, when is the time for government to get out of it? And in this case, municipal government, because you're right, if other orders of government can help, or eventually the whole point is to try to get citizens and corporations and businesses to take the lead on this, and that's what the strategy is trying to do.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions? Someone want to move receipt of information of the reports?
I'm happy to do that, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Essinger. Councillor Banga?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I did have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that.
No worries, go ahead.
Okay, so Mr. Ewan, every dollar we invest in these programs comes from another program. So my question to you is, how do we know that we are making the difference we are intending to make?
Councillor Banger, I guess that's the main reason for the recommendation. You're right, because when you are investing taxpayer dollars and you're trying to determine whether you get the right outcome, that's the value of performance measures. That's why you have them, and that's why you want to make sure that the measures have the right data and that you're measuring the right things. And part of that is value for the dollars in this case. So we will be working with the administration on this and looking at the measures and looking at the data and making sure that they can go to City Council and the taxpayers to show that these were dollars well spent.
Okay, just another question adding on is, we have all the levels of government, they are moving in this direction, some more, some less. Here in Edmonton, are we basically in line with those, or are we too aggressive, or are we too, lagging?
Councillor Banga, I believe it is important to be aligned, but I think probably Mr. Brosnan would be in better position answer the question.
Yeah, again, there's probably a lot in that question as far as a detail. I will say that, part of the rationale for the energy transition strategy and the work that we're doing is Edmonton being in a cold climate, lots of energy use in this city, and significant greenhouse gas emissions from the city. So I think that's part of our strategy addresses those pieces, and I guess the council has set the intent on moving to a low carbon city, but recognizing that we've got a long ways to go and there's a lot of challenge ahead of us. So addressing that in a manner that's prudent, but also achieves the outcomes of council is what we were trying to do with the energy transition strategy and the work we're doing, and these programs in particular.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone wishing to speak to the reports on receipt of information? I'll just maybe say a couple of words then, which is that, of course, always appreciate Mr. Ewan's and his team's capacity to go in and provide this kind of rigorous arm's length analysis of city programs, and then also appreciate that from Mr. Corbould on down, the willingness of the organization to be open to that and take feedback and share information transparently. That is actually, as I was saying earlier, that is precisely the culture that we need. And that's as important when something's not going well as it is when things are going well. And I'm, of course, very pleased that things are going well in these program areas because they're critically important to the city. And it was very important to council over the last 6 years or so since the strategy was adopted and then funded to move into this space because of an absence of real leadership and movement from senior orders of government. So I'm glad that we've been able to scale up programs here that have had an impact and supported market transformation as described in our strategy, and built capacity in the community, built capacity in our organization, and built capacity in the industry side. And done so in a way that's transparent and accountable. And to the extent that we can report on that even more rigorously, that's important too. So the validation of the efficacy of those programs is heartening to me because this file and the energy transition and climate change work is obviously near and dear to me. So I'm very happy to see that. And I think the conversation we've had here a little bit today about how that work is going to evolve as senior orders of government move more and more into this space, as the government of Alberta recognizes that environment, social, and governance considerations are moving not just investment but also talent, and as they shift their approach, and as the opportunity for the city to do to support our innovators in the green building space, to develop and scale new technologies to help us reach those emissions goals while creating jobs and developing intellectual property that is relevant here and beyond as part of the economic development upside, and all the way up to the hydrogen news last week. And I still have to keep reminding people that we were so generous in the announcement talking about the Edmonton region hydrogen hub and the potential for the region that many people were left in the impression that those hydrogen plants are somewhere out in the region, when in fact it is in the Orem Energy Park within the city limits and will contribute to the city's industrial tax base and is an ESG win for this city. And I connect that to this council's leadership on this file, and I'm glad that these programs are aligned with that level of aspiration that this council has had. And all that to say that as this rapidly evolving space changes, our ability to pivot, as we've talked about here, and redeploy resources and hopefully hand off some of this ultimately to the private sector because it's financeable and the incentives and regulatory pieces are all there so that government incentives aren't required. So I think there's an exit strategy to some of this in the market transformation context, but also as the orders of government having, 9/10 of our money and most of the jurisdiction and policy levers over this start to lean into it, the role of the city will change, and we may be able to repurpose these resources either to other priorities relative to corporate energy transition rather than community, or back to other corporate priorities if we're able to reach our other goals. And those will be decisions for future councils to make. But those are in a way harder, knowing that these programs are effective and well delivered and cost effectively managed, which is a good thing. So anyway, I appreciate the look under the hood on these and the good news that they're going well. And that's, from my perspective, a lovely note to end this council's audit committee work on. So thank you again, Mr. Ewan. Thank you, Mr. Brostrom. It's been fantastic working with you for the last 14 years on this work, and all of the folks in your shop as well. So congratulations on a good, clean audit, and happy to support receipt of information. Anyone else wishing to speak? Councillor Essinger to close.
You said it all. Thank you.
And then some, probably, but please vote.
Just waiting for Councillor Essinger.
That's a yes.
We have the votes.
Display the vote. Carried unanimously. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, Audit Committee is dismissed. We're adjourned.